Welcome to Digital Literacy, a guide to using technology and journalism. It's time for our second week of dealing with photography. Last week we sent you out into the field to do some shooting, and hopefully you have all those files ready to go. Today we've got a couple of goals. The first is we are going to capture or download those images with a purpose. So we're going to go through a program called Photo Mechanic here in a couple of minutes, which is going to help you keep yourself organized and rename your files into something that makes sense. We're going to talk about captions and how we put some metadata embedded into our images so that we have that. And then we're going to go over the basics of Photoshop. Now, Photoshop is an incredibly complex program, but we are not going to have time to go through the 10,000 different things that Photoshop can do. But there's half a dozen or so that are very, very important for you to understand. So we're going to go ahead and deal with those. All right, so here on my desktop, over on the right-hand side, you can see that I've already plugged in my Kodak camera. And if you just plug the Kodak in by itself, you're going to end up with two folders here that are going to, or two drives that are going to appear on your desktop. One of them is going to be called ArcSoft, and the other is going to be called No Name. Now, the ArcSoft one, we don't know. We don't need that. That is some editing software that's on there. Now, if you pull your card out and just put it into the card reader, the only thing you're going to see is the No Name one. So I'm going to eject the ArcSoft. And if I double click on No Name, I'm going to get two folders in here. One is DCIM, one is miscellaneous, MISC. There's never anything in the MISC folder you're going to need. But if you click on DCIM, you're going to get a strange numbered one folder in there. And inside of that are all of your images. Okay, and you can see that they've got that JPG extension on them, and they've got file names that mean absolutely nothing. 875_3294.jpg. I have no idea what that means. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab any one of these images, and I'm going to drag it down to the dock and look for a program called Photo Mechanic, which is sitting right here. All right, and when this launches, it's going to open up what's called a contact sheet view. And I can scroll through this, and these are all of the images that I have sitting on that card. So I just did a quick walk around the building here so we'd have some images on here. But what we're going to do first is we're going to write a generic caption for these. So I'm going to hit Command I, and that's going to bring up something called the stationary pad. Now, it's really important that you understand the difference between captions and stationary pad. The stationary pad it's stationary. It allows you to write a generic caption that you're going to apply to all of your images as we copy them off of the card and onto your computer's hard drive. So the first thing I'm going to do in the upper left-hand corner here is I'm going to write a generic caption. So give me a moment here. This is a generic caption of images shot around the Grady College facilities on Tuesday, August 10th, 2010. Now, all of our captions we are going to write to AP style. So the problem that I have with this is I haven't put the location in there. So I'm going to add in Athens, Georgia. And remember that as of May 2010, all of our state abbreviations we spell out completely. So what I usually do here in the captions is I take any IDs, any names, any contact information, any quotes, and I put them in here. The caption is actually, this field is pretty big. So what I'll generally do is I'll put a generic caption in there, and then I'm going to put a photo credit in there. And the way I do that is I put parens, photo / my name, and then I put a comma in, and then again I put some form of contact information in here. So I'm going to drop my website on there. All right, and now if somebody comes across this image, they read the caption, they know how to get in touch with me so they can contact me to license usage of it and hopefully pay me lots of money. Now, if I had any people here, I would add those down here. And what this is going to do, again, stationary pad, when we copy our files over, this is going to get applied to every single image. We will write finalized captions later on. So if I had some people in here, I might put some info in there. So let's say that I had Dean Cully Clark, Grady College, and I would put what they're wearing or some other identifying mark or something like that. So let's say you had a white shirt with a blue tie. Now, this isn't something that I would ever publish, obviously, but now if I go back and look at these images 6 months, 6 years from now, I've got some information there. All right, some other fields that are in there. Caption writers, you can draw AP style is to drop your initials in there. Headline, and these other things over here, as a general rule of thumb, we're not going to worry about those. But over here on the right-hand side, we do want to make sure that we fill out the city, Athens, and make sure the box is checked so that it'll pick it up. Georgia, country. Photographer should be your name. Credit and source should be your name. And then copyright, you want to put the copyright symbol, which on a Macintosh is Option G, and then a space, the year the image was made, another space, your name, and then I also add my contact information in there. All right, now there's a whole bunch of other fields here. Depending on where you're working, you may have to fill those out. Those are the basic ones that we're going to worry about. Caption, city, state, country, photographer, credit, source, and copyright. The rest of them, we can go ahead and leave blank. Now down here along the bottom, there's a couple of buttons. Apply stationery to selected. You're really tempted to press that button right now, and everybody is. If you do that, what's going to happen is you're going to write this data back to the card, which is a quick way to corrupt a card. So we're going to do something that's totally counterintuitive, and we're going to click Close Stationery. Now, if we hit Apple I again, it'll bring it back up, just so that you can have a comfort zone that it's there. It does save this information until you go in and you change it again. But again, never press Apply Stationery to Selected, because you will corrupt your cards at some point in time. So I'm going to close that. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Command A for Select All, and you'll see that this changes the background on these images here. And then I'm going to hit Command Y, and this is the copy command. And I want to make sure that two things are checked here. The first is Apply IPTC Stationery to Copied Files. So if I've got that checked, it's going to take that stationery pad information and apply it as we're copying the images over. The other thing I want to do is I want to rename these files, because the names that are on there right now don't make any sense. So I'm going to delete that. And the standard that we use again is the date. So today is 2010, so 100810. Except I put a 9 in there. 100810. I can get this right. And then an underscore, your initials, an assignment, and then another underscore. And at the end of this box here, there's a sequence button. And I'm going to push that. Now, I can set the sequence variable. You can see over here to the left, it's starting at 0085, so I'm going to hit that button, and I'm going to reset that to 0001 and click OK. Now below that, I can see what's going to happen. It's telling me that 45 photos are going to get renamed. 875_3267.jpg is going to become 100810_Medj_Grady_0001.jpg. Most of you have a folder someplace that has a ton of pictures sitting in it, and they all have completely random names. What we've done here is we've now renamed our photographs with something that makes sense. We've put the date they were shot on there, who shot them, and a slug or a story assignment on there, so that when we look at the file names quickly, we'll be able to figure out what the picture is. All right? Then we're going to come down here and click Copy in the lower right-hand corner, and it's going to ask us for a destination. So I'm going to click on the desktop. I'm going to create a new folder, 100810_Medj_Grady. Click Create, and then a bit of coding error that's in here. This should say Start or Copy or something like that in the lower right-hand corner, but it still says Open. So we're going to click Open, and it's going to go ahead and it's going to pull all of those images off of our card and put them into a folder on the hard drive. All right. Now, it's also going to grab any movie files that are on there, and while it won't allow us to see the movie files or play them, it will embed that metadata in there, so that data is now attached to any movie files, any videos that you have on there. All right. So the next thing I want to do is I want to close this out and eject the camera or the card. If I'm looking up at the top of my window here, I can see I'm still pointed at that folder that's on the camera, and all of my file names here are still the ones that the camera generated. So I'm going to hit the red dot in the upper left-hand corner, and then I'm going to come over to No Name, and I'm going to hit Control and click on it to come down to Eject this, and that's going to take it off of my desktop. And I'm going to unplug the camera, and I want to do this so that I don't accidentally start working from the camera or from the card. Now what I can do is I can either open up this folder and grab one of these images and drag it back into PhotoMechanic, or PhotoMechanic is smart enough I can drag the entire folder, drop it on top of PhotoMechanic, and here are those images. And if I click in the lower right-hand corner on any of these, it'll bring up a larger version of it. And we can see a whole bunch of information here. This is all the information from the camera. All right, so it's telling us what the camera was, it's telling us aperture, shutter speeds, ISOs, all different kinds of information. And if I come up here and click I, or just type the letter I right now, you can see that it has that caption information appended to it. So that's all there. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I can go through these and take a look. I can use the green arrows in the upper left and right hand corner to go through these quickly, or I can just use the left and right arrow keys to cycle through all of these images. Okay? So this way I can go through and I can figure out which images it is that I want. And I can then tag those images. In the lower right-hand corner, there's an area for a checkbox. And let's just say that this is an image that I wanted to bring into Photoshop. I could tag that. And there's another image in here that I want to bring in that we'll do a little work with. Let's grab this very exciting picture of a guy looking a little nervous because school is about to start. All right? And I'm going to tag that as well. And then when I come up here and close the single view, I see that contact sheet again. I can scroll up and down through this. Up along the top, I can go to View, Tagged. This is going to show me just the two. And if I select the two of these, I just dragged across them, or you could click on the first one, then hold down Shift to click on the last one, or Command, click on a couple of them, whatever you want. If I now hit Command E, this will launch Photoshop and bring the images into Photoshop. Right? Now, we're running on the latest version of Photoshop right now, CS5, which has some tools in it that I never want to see you use. You've probably seen online videos for something called content-aware fill. Please, as a journalist, you care about ethics, you care about the truth. Content-aware fill is a really, really dangerous thing. You don't want to start getting involved in that. So that's my ethics lesson that we're going to inject here. But now let's talk about Photoshop. We have three basic areas that we're concerned with. Up across the top here, we have all of the pull-down menus, and there's a couple of things in here we're going to go to in a little while. Along the left-hand side, you have a toolbar, and there's one or two tools over here that we're going to take a look at. And along the right-hand side, you have what are called palettes. Now, the standard setup that we have for palettes is this. In the top right-hand corner, we have an info palette. Below that, we have a history palette, and below that, a layers palette. If you don't have these three sitting here, what you want to do is go ahead and close out whichever ones you do have there that don't fit those three. And the way you do that is in the upper right-hand corner, there's a little pull-down tab, and you just close the tab group. To get them up there, go to Window, and come down to whichever one it is. So the three you want, again, are History, Info, and Layers. So Info and History we're going to use today. Layers you would use in later classes, but you just need to know that it's there. All right. So let's talk about how we're going to do some toning or some adjustments to the brightness and contrast of an image. Those tools are up here under Image, Adjustments, and if you look, the first one that's here is something called Brightness Contrast, and it brings up a pair of sliders, one for brightness and one for contrast. And it's really tempting to come in here and just adjust brightness and contrast here, but I'm begging you, please don't do this. This is a brutal way to handle your images. It's really, really hard on the images. One of the things you need to know about Photoshop is everything you do in Photoshop is actually destructive to your images. You want to do as little work in Photoshop as possible. So I'm going to click Cancel here. And what I want to bring up first is something else under Image Adjustments called Levels. And you can also get this by hitting Command L. This is going to bring up something called a histogram. Now, the histogram is really important because this is, believe it or not, a graphical representation of your exposure. It starts with shadows over here on the left, and then moves through midtones, and then highlight or brighter areas on the right. And the first thing I always do here is I want to make sure that my tonality comes all the way to the edges. And here it's pretty good, but sometimes you'll see a little gap to the left or a little gap to the right. If you do see that, grab the little triangle or home plate that's right below it and slide it in to where you start to see data. Okay? Now again, this one isn't too bad over here on the left. I'm just going to bring this in. Now, because you're watching this video online, you're probably not going to be able to see the subtle change that that had. So I'm going to do an exaggerated change. When I drag this left side in, you'll see that the shadow areas get very, very dark. And if I were to grab the highlight side and drag that in, you'd see that the highlight areas get very, very bright. This needs a really, really minor adjustment here. So that's the first place that I start. Right? And once I'm done with that, I'm just going to click OK. And then I'm going to go back under Image, Adjustments, and I'm going to come down to Curves. Now, curves you can also get to by hitting Command M. Now, this is an oddly named thing because it's called curves, yet what you're looking at is a straight line. And I'm going to move this over here to the side so that I can see my image a little bit better, but still keep it in your field of view. And what I'm going to do here is click in the center of this, hold down my button, and I'm going to drag it up and to the left. And what this will do is this will add brightness. This will brighten the image. And if I drag it down and to the right, this will darken the image. So I'm going to just brighten this up a little bit. So that's how I adjust brightness. This is a much finer level of control here. Now to adjust contrast, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click a second time on the lower half of my line below that dot, and I'm going to drag this down and to the right so that I start to create an S-curve, a really, really gentle S-curve. And what that will do is that will increase contrast. If I drag it up so that I get a reverse S, you can see that I'm starting to take contrast out. Okay? So I'm going to add just a little bit of contrast there. And now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to slide this down here. I still want to see this because I'm going to make some more adjustments, but I want to talk about the info window here. And what we're really concerned with is the RGB values here. The way a digital image works is each area is made up of 3 pixels, one that's colored red, one that's colored green, and one that's colored blue. And those red, green, and blue pixels can be activated from a level of 0, meaning that there is no value to them, to 255. So you have 256 steps. If you have all 3 of these around 0, you have black. If you have all 3 of them around 255, you have white. If you have all 3 of them around 125 to 130, you have a neutral gray. So you can see whether you have a color cast in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move my cursor over here. So I'm right above the 2 on this piece of gray here. And if I look at my values, you can see that my values are fairly close. They're within 10 points of each other. Now I've got 2 sets of values here. The set of values on the left, that's where my original toning is, or my original file is, and on the right, that's the adjustment that I have from curves. Right? So I just want to check and make sure that I don't have a funny color cast here. Now I have a little bit too much red, but on this image, I'm not going to worry about that too much. If I was going to worry about it, what I could do is come back into the curves palette here, click on the eyedropper in the middle down here, and what this is going to do is allow me to sample something that I know is a neutral gray. The left eyedropper is black, the right one is white. It's really hard to use those. I always go for the neutral gray. And since I know this piece of aluminum metal frame here should be gray, I can click on this, and what it's going to do is it's going to adjust the color tone across the entire image so that the whole thing is properly color corrected. All right? So I'm going to do that. I'm going to leave that alone, and I'm going to click OK. Now the second palette I asked you to open up was the history palette, and if you look at this now, you can see it's recorded the things that I have done so far. Built into the Macintosh is the undo command. If you hit Command Z, it'll undo the last thing that you did. So if I hit Command Z, it'll take away that curves adjustment. If I hit it again, it puts it back. But it only does one level. The history palette will let you record everything that you do on an image, and you can go into the preferences, and I think we have it set for 20 actions, so the last 20 things that we did to this file we will see in there. All right, so that's basic toning. Get used to using that RGB field up there and using levels and curves. Brightness and contrast is a really, really harsh way of handling this. All right, so the next thing we want to do is we want to crop this image a little bit. So I'm going to come over here to my tools, and the 4th one down is a crop tool. All right, it looks like a couple of little calipers there. If I click on that, we'll see up across the top here, I've got some fields that I can fill in: width, height, resolution. I always leave those blank because what I do is I want to do my crop first, and then I'll go in and I'll size the image separately. Now, if you were told to crop to a specific size, you can plug that information in there and you'll get what's called a constrained crop. So right now I can crop something that's a really strong vertical or really strong horizontal, and if I were to go ahead and put numbers in there, what I would end up with is something that's in proportion there. Now, after I've drawn that box, I can go in and grab a corner and I can move it around a little bit. So for this image, I think what I want is this really, really strong horizontal. And you can see that I've got this little rule of thirds grids here, this little compositional tool. If you can, try and get your center of interest, your main subject, at one of these intersecting points, and graphically this becomes really, really pleasing. So I can now drag down a little bit off the top because I want a little bit tighter there. I'm going to take this trash can off of the right-hand side there. And so I've got that much space between the edges. I want about that much space over here, which will let me take that brightness out there. Maybe I come in a little bit tighter so I can take out this. And what I'm looking for is I'm just walking my eye around the edges and making sure there's nothing really distracting around the edges. So let's come in a little tighter here. And now what I can do is either double click or hit return, and it'll apply that crop. All right, so we've got that set. Now what I want to do is I want to size it. So I'm going to come up under image again and come down to image size. And what I want to do is just change the dimensions here. Now for your assignment, I'm going to ask you to take all of your images that you're going to use and resize them to 1000 pixels on the long dimension. So right now on the long dimension we're at 2772, so I'm just going to type in 1000 and click OK. All right. Now if this image gets a little small like this, I can hit Command and plus and make it bigger, and Command minus will make it smaller. I can also hit Command 0, and that'll give me about the largest image that I can fit into my frame here. All right. Next thing we want to do is we want to write our final caption. Now we wrote a generic caption that's applied to this, so I'm going to come up under File and come down to File Info, almost to the bottom now. And this is going to bring up a little window here, and this description here is that generic caption that we wrote before. And what we can do now is we can come in and we can write a finalized one. So if that were Dean Clark, I would then put in Dean Clark, and this is not Dean Clark. So on the Tate Plaza near the Grady College on Tuesday, August 10th. Now obviously that's not Dean Clark. And then I would take out this information here. Depending upon who you're shooting for, you may also put contact information in here for your subjects. If you take the Intro to Photojournalism class, you're required to have contact info for everybody. All right, so that's in there. I can click OK. And now I'm pretty much done with this image. I've got it about where I want it. Now what I could do is I could come in, and if I just hit Command S or come over here to the Save command, I would save this file, but it's going to overwrite my original one, which is not necessarily a good thing. So what I want to do is I want to do a Save As. And what this will do is allow me to choose the location for this. So I'm just going to drop this on the desktop. Click Save. JPEG Options is going to come up next, and leave your quality at 12. That's the highest quality that you can get. And that image is now done. All right, so that's the basics of Photoshop there. Again, there's a million other things in here. Well, not a million, probably 5,000 or 6,000 other combinations of things that you can do in here. We're going to keep it really simple. So here's your vocab for this week. A couple of things that you want to be thinking about. Stationary pad in Photo Mechanic. Remember, the stationary pad is where you write that generic caption and you never ever click Apply to Selected. That's going to cause all kinds of problems for you. We talked about brightness and contrast and how we don't want to use that, because what we really want to be using is first levels, which gives us that graphical representation of our exposure called the histogram, and curves, which starts out as a straight line, and then we put a couple of points on there and we turn it into a curved line. You want to be thinking about RGB, the red, green, and blue values. Remember that they start at a level of 0 and move all the way up to 255. So 0 on the red is an absence of red, a total absence of red. 255 is a total saturation of red. And if you have the red, green, and blue values at about the same point value, you're going to have a neutral tone. We talked about JPEGs again, JPGs. Those are the files that you want to be saving these things out as. Now for your homework, or for your work in class this week, what we want you to do is go ahead and download the card using Photo Mechanic. So you're going to write a generic caption and then apply that with the copy command. While you're also renaming those files. So put the day's date on them, your initials, the assignment, and then start your sequence at 0001. Once you've got those copied over, go ahead and close the Photo Mechanic window by hitting the red dot up top, eject your card, and then open the folder that you had copied over. And once you've done that, go through and select 4 images. Last week you were supposed to shoot a portrait, a couple of longs, a couple of mediums, and a couple of close-ups. Just choose one of each of those in Photo Mechanic, and then use Apple E to bring them over into Photoshop. And once you've done that, go ahead and tone them, crop them, give them a size of 1000 pixels on the long dimension, and then write a finalized caption for them. Again, go up under File to File Info and write your final caption. And then save the images as JPEGs to your desktop, and then drop them on the server. Now I would also recommend that you burn a disk of your raw files, the ones that you copied over, as well as taking the toned images and dropping those on your thumb drive. And that's it. That's the basics of Photoshop. Hopefully this made sense for you. If you have any questions, ask your professors. As always, they are the experts on this. This series was produced for the Journalism Department of the Grady College of Journalism and Mass Communication at the University of Georgia by a grant from the James M. Cox Institute for Newspaper Management Studies.